So welcome to today's webinar, hosted by South Westminster BIDS and Sustrans, the charity that makes it easier for people to walk and cycle. I'm Rhys Williams from Sustrans London, and I'll be hosting today's session on unlocking London safely with active travel. Just to get some ground rules out of the way, we're just going to ask people to keep themselves on mute throughout the webinar. Any questions can be put in the chat box, and we'll have time for a Q&A session at the end of the event. And just to let everyone know that today's session is being recorded. Big thank you to you all for joining, and also to our speakers for giving us their time. Speakers today are Fiona Blackley, Head of Neighbourhoods and Networks at Sustrans London; Sarah Berry, active travel campaigner and host of the new Road Rage podcast. We've got V Ford from Joyriders London, the organisation that empowers women through cycling; and Jeremy Tranter, Behaviour Change Officer at Sustrans London as well. So without further ado, I'll pass over to our first speaker, Fiona, to take us through some the background of the area.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It is now just. I'm just going to pop up my screen for you to see. Rhys, can you give me a thumbs up that you can see that? Perfect. Thank you very much. So welcome, everybody. I'm just going to talk a little bit. My role in Sustrans is about infrastructure. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we use the physical environment in central London to get to and from the local area. And I know the excellent speakers that are coming after me will talk about some slightly different aspects of walking and cycling journeys. So without further ado, I will hopefully move slide. So this is just, there's an awful lot of information on here, so probably too much to take in. I'll make sure that anyone who's attended today has access to these afterwards, so there's no need to worry about anything that's on these. But all the information that's on here is from a survey that Sustrans carry out every 2 years across cities in the UK. We've been doing it for 6 years now, and we're just about to move into our 4th set of surveys. And the thing that we find every single time we carry out this survey, when we talk to local people who live in urban areas, is that safety is the single biggest barrier to more people cycling. Why don't people already cycle? It's because they don't feel safe. So only about a quarter of people think cycling safety is good. Everybody else thinks it's less than good. There is an awful lot of information that we gather about what might help people to cycle more. So the biggest thing of those, 79% think more traffic-free cycle routes away from the roads, particularly if they're nice. They go through parks, green spaces, along rivers and canals. Similar numbers, 77% think more cycle tracks along roads which are physically separated from traffic and pedestrians. So it's a really important thing for people to feel safe, to have routes that are not mixing with vehicles, with lorries, buses, cars. And there's an important distinction. A lot of when we do transport planning and infrastructure planning looks at evidence and data, and to do that we would look at accident statistics, to look at a stretch of road or a junction, to find out what's the accident history here. Is it safe? Is it safe for people walking and cycling? And we would look at how many accidents there are in a certain place. But that only tells us a very, very small part of the picture. And the far more important aspect is around what people feel and whether they feel safe. And so you can have an area that actually has a very good accident record. There's very few recorded incidents that have been reported to the police, but there can still be particular issues of concern in that environment for people. They might not feel safe crossing the road for a massive variety of reasons. So it's really important that when we're thinking about people's journeys, and if you're wanting to start cycling, or you've recently started cycling, it's about how safe you feel. Some of the things that we can do on the right hand side there to make people feel more safe is actually improving the road quality and making the surface better, so that it's less lumpy and bumpy and you feel a bit less wobbly. There's also an important thing about lighting, and particularly through the winter months, how safety is affected and how people feel can be affected by the lighting. But the fourth thing down there, the orange bar, is improving routes and facilities for safe cycling. And that does make a massive difference in how people feel when they're walking and cycling. So this is a map that has been produced as part of our work in collaboration with the North Bank Business Improvement District that looks at a lot of the walking and cycling infrastructure in central London, and particularly the North Bank area is in the middle there in the red. And all the lines on the map are some kinds of cycle routes. Some of them are very formal, some of them are less formal. And there's also some walking and cycling distances on there, or times as they actually are. So how long it could take you to walk or cycle from those further away places. So you can see there that there's an awful lot of areas within central London that are very easily accessible, either on foot or by bike. And I'm going to pick up just a couple of those particular routes and talk about why they're particularly safe and particularly relevant for getting in and out of this local area. I've also included a couple of web links on the right-hand side there to the Transport for London's information. They produce information on some of the cycle routes in London. It's a bit patchy. Some of it, the information is very good. Some of it is being improved. So it's not necessarily all comprehensively great. I would also recommend that anybody who is wanting to start looking at a new route, for example, uses whatever sort of journey or trip planner you would ordinarily use, whether it's plotting your destination on Google Maps or using something like City Mapper, because it can give you different suggestions for different routes into places. And everybody has different preferences on their tools and their planning, and it can be sometimes that, say, the Transport for London information provides great information, or it could be that some of the other providers provide something that's better and more accessible for you. Some of the mapping can be particularly good on some of those things. So it depends whether you like to read about a route or whether you're, for me, I'm a very visual person. I like a picture, I like a map. It helps me to understand it. But for other people, there's a whole range of different tools out there that give you, for example, turn-by-turn information. So I would definitely recommend trying out some different sources of information. So in terms of traveling to this area, the two that I'm going to pick out as being particularly useful, I should say that although I work for Sustrans, I definitely don't count myself as being a cyclist. The only formal cycle training I've had in my life has been by Jeremy, who you'll hear from later. And that was when I joined the organisation. So I consider myself a nervous cyclist. I definitely don't relish cycling on busy roads with lots of traffic. My natural inclination is definitely to find routes where I feel more safe. And that doesn't apply to everybody. Some people are very happy going on any routes and taking the most direct. I will generally try and find something that that is more suited to making me feel comfortable. So particularly for me, on this map, the blue routes are the ones that do it for me. They're the strategic routes, and they are mostly separated from traffic in some form or another. So they're the ones that I would often pick. So for example, if I was trying to get to this area in the centre here, and I was coming from, say, well, north or south, I would always take one of these north-south routes and then go east-west through here, because that's my personal preference. There's plenty of people who will cycle through this area to the north on all those little back streets. And I'll come on to my final point at the end. So cycleway 6, for example, is the north-south one that I showed on the map. It technically runs from King's Cross, and the sign at the bottom there is the signing that you'll see if you're out on the roads. So C6, cycleway 6, and those green signs are the new form of signing of this particular route. So you should be able to follow those signs and know where you're going and know that you're sticking on the right route. The photograph on the left there is Blackfriars Bridge, and you can see, to me, it felt very strange looking at that photograph of how incredibly busy it was. I haven't seen London that busy in quite a while now, but we're hoping we're going to be getting back to those kind of levels in the not too distant future. So you can see there's a lot of people that use Blackfriars Bridge to cross it on the bus. There's lots of people walking across it, and also cycling across it. So it's a really important north-south link across the Thames, and it has this excellent new route that was opened about 3 or 4 years ago now, and it takes you over the bridge. You're completely, as you can see, there's a separation there, so the traffic stays on one side of the bridge, and people walking and cycling and scooting and rollerblading and skateboarding and doing all the active travel modes stay on the other side of the bridge together. And it's a beautiful way to cross the Thames, particularly on a sunny day when this is taken. And I used to do it on my one of my routes to work. I worked in Temple for a while, and this was my walking route to work, going over this bridge in the morning, and you get a really glorious view. So I would highly recommend, if you need any north-south routes into the area, that this is the way to get in there. So if you're approaching from the north or south, going over Blackfriars Bridge and following these green Cycleway 6 signs. The other important route that I highlighted on the map earlier is the east-west route, the east-west corridor. So that runs along the embankment, and runs along the whole of the south side of the North Bank area. It runs along the north bank of the Thames. So the Thames is just behind these trees on the right hand side here. You can't see it, but this is the cycleway. Again, you can see there's a really nice wide buffer here that keeps people cycling or on scooters or whatever completely separate from the traffic that stays on the other side of the road. And obviously there's a nice wide footway along the embankment as well, so loads of space for walking on both sides of the road, in fact. It's nice because it's tree lined, it's along the river, like I mentioned, so that it's particularly pleasant for walking and cycling. You get a whole range of people who use this route. You do get very fast racers. You also get kids on their little bikes scooting along very much slower, and so it's a really nice place for cycling and seeing all sorts of different people. And it's a great connection east-west going in and out of the area. At the moment, it's signed as Cycle Superhighway 3. So it's the pink signs, and you get these counters that count the number of cyclists per day and the number of cyclists through the year that go along this route. It's always quite nice if you go along there and you manage to clock it over a nice round number. I like to get like a nice 0 at the end of it. So it's a great way to get east-west, and again, feel very safe, and get some lovely views while you're in the centre of town as well. And the final thing I was going to say, I mentioned that I worked in Temple, and as well as those really key routes that I've mentioned, it's really important, I think, to get people to stop and explore. So when you're not in a massive hurry, explore some of those backstreet areas. Just to the east is the area that I worked in Temple. This is a massive garden that is it's a private garden, but it's open at lunchtimes. And I only found it through going on a lunchtime walk to wander around and explore. And as you can see, lots of people working in the area go and use this space in their lunch breaks and have picnics in the sunshine. And also in the winter, you'd be surprised how busy it is. So walking in and around some of those smaller back streets, you find lovely pockets of green spaces. So I would highly recommend, as well as sticking on some of the major arteries that can feel really safe and comfortable, also getting out on foot and exploring some of the local area and finding those little spots. Sometimes they're really shady and they're nice on a cool day, and if it's really hot in the summer, other times you get these lovely sun traps that you can sit out and enjoy your lunch times. So it's a fantastic area of London that I would highly recommend getting out and walking and cycling. I'm going to leave it there. If there's any, I can't see any the chat while I'm presenting. So if there's any burning questions, I can take them right now. Otherwise, there's plenty of speakers who will take questions towards the end. Or if there's any particular questions, Reese or one of my other Sustrans colleagues can take those and bring them back to me. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Hopefully, there we go.
Perfect, thank you, Fiona. And yeah, like Fiona says, any questions, Fiona has to rush off, but yeah, any questions, please do put them in the chat, and we can get back to you with a response from Fiona by email, or yeah, by whichever means is most convenient for you. So yeah, thank you very much, Fiona. Right, so we'll move swiftly on to Sarah, our second speaker.
Hi everyone. I'm going to do something really annoying for the host, which is 10 minutes ago we had a meeting and I said I didn't have slides, and then I changed my mind and made slides very last minute. So I'm going to go ahead and mix things up and share some slides. It's really exciting to be here with you today. If you'd told me a year ago that I would be speaking on a panel like this about learning to cycle in London and you know, making a safe London for cycling, I would have probably laughed in your face loudly and cruelly, mostly because I never ever thought that I would be the kind of person who would cycle in London. I didn't grow up learning how to ride a bike. I had very anxious parents, and I was a very anxious child, and I grew up in a very car dependent suburban part of Australia. And it was just seen as being too dangerous when I was a kid. I wasn't very good at it. And so my parents bought me a bike when I was about 5 or 6 years old with training wheels, and I never progressed on to learning how to ride without those sort of stabilizers. But when I moved to London about five or 6 years ago now, you know, I carried on through my entire life thinking like, this isn't a big barrier, you know, not a lot of people in Sydney cycle. It's a small walkable city. I can get around without a bike. Everything's fine. Then I moved to London, and I would sort of arrive at work in the morning, and my colleagues would like get into our office in Farringdon, and they'd like slow motion take off their helmet and like, you know, fluck their hair around and like look like they'd had an amazing time, and just come in and they were all like, I've exercised and I've enjoyed the sunshine and I love life. And then there was me, who'd just gotten off like the very sweaty tube that was like so angry at my fellow man and just like having a terrible time every morning. And I thought, God, I would love to be like one of my colleagues who is cycling into London. So a couple of years ago, I took one of TfL's Learn to Cycle courses, the Cycle Confident sort of basic courses, and a very lovely woman who's definitely not paid enough money spent 2 hours with me in a school playground teaching me how to stay up on a bike without stabilizers, and then as I got the hang of that, put up some traffic cones so that I would learn to sort of weave between those things, and I left that day knowing that I could sort of keep a bike upright and move it around a space as long as there were absolutely no obstacles in it and absolutely no surprises coming at me. And as confident as that made me feel, it wasn't enough for me to feel comfortable cycling in London, because as everyone here will know, London is not hazard free, and London is not free of surprises either. So that was sort of, for me, I thought the end of my cycling journey. I was living in Kensington at the time, just off Kensington High Street, which did not have a cycle lane and still does not have a cycle lane, unfortunately. And you know, it just didn't feel like something that I would be able to do. But then I moved to Brixton a few years later, and during COVID, my council, Lambeth, was one of the places that introduced low traffic neighbourhoods, the idea that they would sort of restrict where traffic could go to make streets safer and quieter for people who wanted to walk and cycle. And I said to myself, like, if I don't do this now, when my council is literally changing the design of the streets to make it easier for people like me to do this, I'm never going to do it. So the day I got my letter, I went out and I bought a bike. That was 9 months ago. That was June of last year. Now I ride almost every day. It's my main form of transportation in London. I did my biggest ride the other day, which was 27-mile circular around South London. And I'm planning a cycle trip around the entire UK during a sabbatical over the summer. But one of the things that I've realized is that, like, when I hadn't learned how to ride a bike, when I hadn't done those things yet, hearing me say that was just like, you are a world away from me, right? Like, I am never going to get to where you are. And there are a few fears that I had before I got started that I think that once you do start cycling, people don't tend to talk about enough. So I'm going to talk about what those things were and how I sort of overcame them and what the results were. So my first big fear was, what if I fall off my bike? And the answer to that is I do quite regularly. Just what Fiona was talking about before, the quality of the roads and the state of the roads, you know, that is a really big factor. And one of the things is that I've never thought to think about before I started riding a bike is cracks in the road, which are my biggest nemesis, because I never go particularly fast. And that means that if I line my wheels up perfectly over a crack in the road, my wheel can get stuck and my body will just keep going with momentum. But what I've also learned is that when I do fall off my bike, I'm never going that fast. And the worst thing that happens is, you know, I get embarrassed. The other day I went for a ride out to the Thames barrier with my partner, and we were going through Silvertown, right where they're about to build the Silvertown tunnel. And there was a bunch of like construction workers, like very like manly, accomplished construction workers. And I was like, it will be so embarrassing if you fall off your bike. Do not fall off your bike. And obviously, because I was thinking about falling off my bike, I fell off. And in front of, basically on the floor in front of all of these construction workers, and then, you know, was mortified and very quickly got up and cycled off again. Managed to injure nothing but my pride, and that has mostly been my experience. I'm quite a clumsy person, and one of my friends, when I was first got my bike, and they said, what are you so scared of? And I said, what if I fall off it? They said, you fall over all the time, like you're fine, it'll just be falling off a bike. So that to me is something that like now I'm like, it might happen, but you know, I'm gonna be okay. The second thing I worried about was, what if I got lost? And you know, what if I'm riding and I've taken a wrong turn and I'm on the middle of my bike and I can't figure out where I'm going, and I'm in traffic and I'm stuck, and then I end up like in Brighton. That also isn't a thing that happens. I've got a thing that I'd recommend for any new riders, which is called a quad lock. And it's a thing that attaches to your bike and then attaches to your phone case. And it means that you can attach your phone to your handlebars and have your map right in front of you. So every like 3 seconds, I'm looking at my map to make sure that I'm going in the right direction. And so far, despite having like no internal compass, I've never managed to get lost on my bike. So that has been fine. A big worry for me was, what if I don't feel safe? This is one that, again, until I started riding my bike, I didn't realize would sort of not happen very often once I got the hang of things, but also that there was a very quick solution to. So, you know, when I first started, I couldn't even ride on my own street, even though it was just like a quiet residential road. And I couldn't do that on my own. It took me a month of going around in laps on the park to feel like I could ride the 2 minutes to the local bakery to pick up a loaf of bread on my own or something like that. But I exponentially got a lot more confident and went, you know, from feeling like I could do a lap of my local neighborhood to riding 10 miles to Kingston within sort of 3 weeks. And that confidence built up really quickly. And one of the reasons for that is, if you ever don't feel safe on your bike, if you're ever in a situation where you think, oh, this, you know, there's too much traffic and this person behind me is really aggressive or anything along those lines, you just pull over and you get off. You just move over to the side of the road. It's going to be, in London, never going to be the case where you're in somewhere where you can't stop and just get off your bike and wheel it. I do that if the traffic's too heavy. I do that if I see a nice park. I do that if I want a coffee. I do that if there's a slight hill and I don't feel like, you know, exerting myself physically at that particular time. I do all of those things. There's one slide that I've skipped here that I think is important, so I'm just going to say it without the words, which is, what if someone gets mad at me? What if someone yells at me? And what if a driver, if I'm in their way, I'm going slowly, I'm doing all of that sort of stuff. You know what, that happens. And that was, especially as a woman, I think, like, I have been taught my entire life not to take up too much space, and the idea that I would be delaying other people because I'm going so slowly was something that was, you know, a real blocker to me for riding my bike. It didn't take me very long at all to feel like that road was as much mine as it was anyone else's. And I had just as much right to be there, to keep myself safe and to go at that speed. And, you know, people do yell at me, people do get angry at me. And usually I just sort of like smile and laugh because I'm having such a wonderful time and they're clearly having such a terrible time. And I know that my choice of transportation is one that very, very rarely leaves me in a bad mood. And that's something that I was able to get past very quickly. One of my favorite experiences is when you pull up at a traffic light and there's a car behind you and you can hear them revving behind you and they go as fast as they can to overtake you. And then a minute later, you meet them at the next lights, and then you start in front of them again, and over and over and over. And eventually, you know, you get to your destination just as quickly as they do, except you're having a wonderful time in the sunshine and they're sitting there feeling frustrated and all of those things. And the last one that was a big one for me is, what if people laugh at me? I wasn't confident, I was clumsy, I was wobbly, I'm a big woman. I thought, like, what if I ride and people think I'm, you know, trying to ride to lose weight and failing and think I'm doing a terrible job? What if people tell me I'm fat? What if people tell me I'm slow? What if people tell me I shouldn't be there? No one's ever said that to me when I've been on my bike. All of the interactions that I've had with people have generally been ones of me complimenting them on their dogs or on their jackets, or talking about how nice the weather is, or chatting with ticketing officers as they're walking around. Every interaction that I've had with people out there in the world has been a good one. And if there are people laughing at me and I don't see it, you know, the reason for that is because I'm gone so quickly and I'm so caught up in how beautiful the city is around me that I don't notice and I don't care. So all of these things that, you know, if you're someone who's thinking about starting to cycle into work or starting to cycle in London, and some of these what ifs are holding you back as well, don't let them, because they'll all disappear very, very quickly once you sort of discover the joy of cycling. But that's it from me. So thank you for having me on and letting me chat about my experiences today.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, no, it's always really, really inspiring to hear from people like yourself who've taken up cycling in London as a new cyclist, because yeah, London doesn't from the outside feel like the easiest place to start that journey in cycling. So yeah, no, that's always really inspiring to hear, and leads nicely on to Viv, our next speaker from Joyriders. So yeah, Viv, I'll hand over to you now.
Great, thanks, Reese. Okay, I'm going to share my screen as well. Got a bit of a little presentation here. It's Sarah actually is responsible for the design of our new logo, and you're among the first people to see it. So thanks for that, Sarah. So Joyriders are a group who really, our aim in life is to bring thousands and thousands more women to cycling. At the moment in the UK, 70% of all regular riders are men. So it's a huge imbalance. And what we really want to do is help women to cycle, to use that infrastructure, to get out there and be confident and be assertive, just taking their space on the street. We've been around for about 4 years, and over that time we've grown to a point where we're now running, I think this year we expect to run at least 350 rides, and we're expanding beyond London this year. We were the London Sports Club of the Year in 2019, and we've found that the pandemic has been amazing for us, because we went online very, very quickly. We were running weekly coffee breaks with a cycling theme for women. We videoed routes of the week, everything from beginner to key worker commuter routes. We did how-to tips and tricks, everything from learning to ride to riding in advanced traffic. And that has just brought us an immense audience. And we are running loads and loads of rides right across London from this week onward, and in further places as well, which I'll tell you about. Leading on from some of the things Fiona and in fact Sarah have said, we asked all our riders a few years back what prevented them from cycling before they came on a joyride. And 50% said the roads are too dangerous, or that they lacked confidence to do it. They didn't know routes. They didn't have a bike. 30% of women who would like to ride don't have a bike to ride on. So it's a really big barrier. But other things that Sarah said, concerned about what other people might say, self-conscious. A lot of women think they have to buy Lycra. Well, they don't. So, but it's just lots and lots of things stand in the way of enabling women to just ride a bike. What we found was that 75% of the women who did come on rides with us had never ridden on a regular basis before coming on joyrides. And then after starting to come on joyrides, 30% of those women were then riding every single day, and another 50% were riding at least once a week. So that was absolutely fantastic. And we know that that has continued. And our real role, we're not a cycling club. What we really are is we're trying to provide a rite of passage for women who would like to ride a bike, or they're returning to riding a bike after years perhaps not riding. And we're trying to help them to gain the confidence they need to start riding individually. And that confidence, you can see when people began riding with us, a quarter of them could cycle but didn't have full control of the bike. And after riding with us, 70% could control the bike and did ride anywhere at all, that's 36%. And another 36% said, I can control the bike, I can ride on roads, I'm not 100% confident, but a huge change from when they began riding with joyriders. And women got benefit not only in riding a bike, they encouraged their family and friends to ride bikes. They mixed with people from different communities. They felt more connected in their own communities. So lots of other benefits sort of were reported by people who came on joyrides. So I want to tell you what sort of rides we offer. All of our rides are relatively slow. They're social. They're fully supported by 2 or more trained ride leaders. We have a ratio of 1 ride leader to every 4 riders. Now, again, that's because we're not a cycling club. We're trying to provide support for women to gain the confidence and learn how to be assertive of their space on the road. Our beginner rides are extremely slow. They might only go 5 miles, 2.5 miles to somewhere for coffee and cake, and 2.5 miles back. They'll rarely touch a road, and if they do, it'll be an extremely quiet one. Our beginner plus rides, a little bit further, maybe a little bit faster, definitely also with a coffee stop. Our intermediate rides will still have loads of green spaces, but probably a little more on quiet roads, and we'll probably touch a few busy roads, just for short distances. It's really important that people are able to step through these stages because loads of the women, as you saw, who come to ride with us haven't ridden for years or haven't ridden at all and have perhaps only just learned to ride. Stepping up again though, we run what we call a commuter ride, but it could be a ride to the shops. It could be about the school run. It could be about visiting friends and family. It's getting from one place to the other. So not just going on a leisure ride, you're going on a ride for a purpose. So planning the route and riding the route safely. And we run family rides as well, which are a lot like beginner rides, except with the whole family. Oop, wrong way. So from this week, we're running rides right across northeast London, Newham, Redbridge, Waltham Forest, Hackney, Tower Hamlets. From May, we'll be adding in South London, Wandsworth, Lambeth, just for you, Sarah, Southwark, Lewisham, Greenwich, and hopefully we'll add more to that as time goes on. From mid-May, we'll be cycling across North and Northwest London, and we'll be doing all those ride types in these locations. We're also cycling in Oxfordshire from May, Manchester from May, Cambridgeshire from June. We're looking at Newcastle from mid-June, and we've got other locations getting underway as well. So how can women find out about the rides in their area? We do have an email list and we send out information so people can book onto our rides. We do need people to book for our rides because of our ratio of 1 to 4 leaders to participants. So that's one way of doing it, on our email list. You can follow us on Facebook or Twitter or Eventbrite. I'll post these after I'm done. We also are very keen for experienced riders to volunteer with us, potentially as ride leaders or in other ways. You can contact me, viv@joyriderslondon.org, and I'll send out the information to you. And absolutely keen to support anyone that wants to set up a Joyriders group in an area where there isn't one as yet. How else can you help? A really key thing for us is we don't talk to other cycling groups. I mean, we do. We talk to British Cycling, we talk to Cycling UK, we talk to the London, the LCC, but that isn't where we find our participants. Our participants are not members of cycling groups. We need to contact them through community groups, faith groups, schools, parent groups, women's groups. These are where the women who want to cycle but are not yet cycling are. They're not in cycling groups. So if you are able to introduce us to any of those types of groups, we'd be very happy to talk to them about how they can come on our rides and join in and gain that confidence and that wonderful feeling of joy and freedom. The most common word that women feed back to us after coming on rides for the first time is freedom. Just that wonderful freedom that riding a bike gives people. And that's so satisfying, I have to tell you. So yeah, if you know of anyone, any of those groups, please do put us in touch. And that, as they say, is that. Thanks very much.
Perfect. Thank you. No, that's really is inspiring as well, isn't it, to see how accessible these rides can be once people are aware of them. And I think, yeah, everyone doing everything we can to spread that message and point people in the direction of organisations like Joyriders to make the most and experience that freedom for themselves. It's really important. And yeah, I know something we're keen to do at Sustrans is to work with and promote those sorts of organisations like yourselves as much as possible. And it does lead very nicely on to the work that Jeremy has been doing in his time at Sustrans in terms of helping people to feel more safe and confident physically on a bike, and steps that you can take to feel safe and confident. So Jeremy, over to you.
Lovely, thanks Rhys. Really lovely to hear the other speakers and the wonderful initiatives that are going on. But there's one theme that came over quite often, which is confidence and feeling safe on the road. So it comes to all of us when we have to get to that point of turning theory into practice and get on our bike and actually ride on the road. Because we've got to be doing two things when we do that. We're controlling our bicycle and we're managing our relationship with the roads and the traffic, our roadcraft. And there are some very clear skills that can underpin an increase in confidence at that point. So what I thought I'd do today is we can go through a cycling self-assessment so we can identify the skills that we need to brush up on that will give us that confidence. Now, ideally, you do this one-to-one, you talk to someone, you spend a lot of time listening to how they feel about the road. Do they feel safe? But for a webinar, I'll put the question, give you a moment to consider, and then I'll tell you what I'd be looking for as the answer from you. So there will be homework, I warn you, and so if you want to take notes. So first question is, where are your fingers when you're riding? Now the answer I'm looking for is your fingers are ready on the brake levers. If you've got one or two fingers ready on the brake levers, then when a zombie walks off the pavement, your fingers will be there ready to stop you. I noticed in Viv's presentation, there was a picture, all the riders have their fingers in the right place. That's brilliant to see. Because if you're traveling at 10 miles an hour, that's more than 4 meters a second you're traveling. If you can save half a second of not stumbling around finding your brakes, you're a good 2 meters further away from a potential accident. The next question would be, how many brakes do you use when you want to stop? I'm hoping your answer will be both brakes, because both brakes will give you more stopping power. If you want to stop in a hurry, then there's a particular kind of posture you can adopt, which is you put your arms straight as if you're pushing a table across the room, and that's going to stop you flying forwards. You move your weight back on the saddle, so there's more weight on the back wheel, which will make the back brake more efficient. You keep your feet on the pedals and your eyes on where you're going. Your braking power will be greatly improved by that, And if your fingers are already ready on those brake levers, you're halfway to that crouch position that will make your stopping much more efficient. Now, there's an important question as well when you're on the road is, do you know what your stopping distance is? Would anyone know what their stopping distance is here? Because there's a bit of homework you can do to find out. Take someone who trusts you to the local park, and then you ride at them in a straight line as fast as you like, and you stop as close as you dare. Do that 10 times, and every time you do it, make sure you've got that posture right. Make sure you've got your eyes forward. After 10 times, you'll have a feeling for how long it takes you to stop. Now, why is that important? When you're on the road, one thing that worries people a lot is that taxi going to come out of that side road? Now, if you know your stopping distance, it's probably going to be about 3 or 4 meters. You can get pretty close to that taxi, close enough to make really good eye contact before you're in any danger at all of that taxi coming out in front of you. So if you know your stopping distance, you know that you're perfectly safe until you get within a point where you know you're going to need to stop. Again, do the homework in the park and your confidence will improve there. Next question. You're at a junction, you're about to start off. One foot is on the ground and the other is on the pedal. Where in the rotation of that pedal, where in the rotation is that pedal? Now, the answer I'm looking for would be somewhere around about 2 o'clock. Because if your pedal is up at 2 o'clock, just above the horizontal, when you push down on that pedal, you're going to get the maximum power out of it, and you're going to move off using all of the energy in your leg. You'll move off much faster. Now, a very important thing, sometimes we have to creep forward a little bit so we can get a good view of the road. We might want to move a little bit, and we put our foot back on the ground. Can we set that pedal back into the 2 o'clock position using just 1 foot? And also, can you do that without looking at your foot? So again, this is more homework. Go to the park, see if you can creep forward a little bit, stop with your foot on the ground, set that pedal again, just using the 1 foot and without looking at your foot. If you can do that, again, on the road, your eyes are on the road, being observant, you're always in the position of power ready to move off, and you're going to reduce any delays that might cause contention with an irritable driver behind you. Another thing that's important is gears. So I'd ask, why would you change gears? What circumstances would you change it into a different gear? Now, we know that gears will be useful if you're going up a hill, but where I find gears most useful is to make sure that I can accelerate quickly. If anyone's a car driver, you know you'd start off in gear 1 or gear 2. It's the same on a bike. If you select a lower gear, you've got your pedal set at the right point. You'll be quick off the mark. I'm not an athlete, but I leave the cars in the dust at the junction because I'm ready, foot's ready, I'm in the correct gear. Now, there are a couple of different kinds of gears you have on your bike. There are derailleur gears where you've got lots of toothy sprockets at the back and a pointy down bit, and you've got hub gears like you'd have on a Boris bike. Most people will probably have the derailleur gears. Now, there's an important part about derailleur gears. You can only change when you're turning the pedals. If you try and change when the pedals aren't turning, your chain gets tangled up. So if you want to be in a low gear for a junction, the question is, when are you going to have to change gear? Now, the answer I'd like to hear is you're going to change gear before you arrive at the junction. So again, a little bit of homework. Go to the park, make sure you can operate the right-hand shifter in particular without looking at your hand. Make sure you can change down into a gear that's good for starting off. And then practice starting off in that low gear, changing to a high gear, and then changing down to a low gear and then stopping. Because what you're doing there is you're preparing yourself for arriving at a junction. So you'll be in a low gear, you have your pedal set, and you'll be in the best position you can to move off quickly and avoid having cars getting impatient with you. Right, another very important thing is observation. So the question I'll ask you is, are you able to look over your right shoulder? Are you able to look over your left shoulder while you're riding along and without wobbling? If you find it problematical to do that, we'll come on to a solution in a second. But I'd also like to ask the question is, why do you look over your shoulder? Any answers there? Now, we obviously look behind to find out what's going on behind us, but there's something else very important that we can do when we look over our shoulder. We need to be able to look over our shoulder enough to do this, is you make eye contact with the person behind. Yeah, hello. You say hello with your eyes. You're a human being talking to another human being. You're both road users. Eye contact really, really defuses any potential conflict because you're talking to another human being. So once you've said hello with your eyes, you need to then communicate your intentions. How do we communicate our intentions? We use a hand signal. And we need to do it for 3 elephants. 1 elephant, 2 elephant, 3 elephant. Long enough so that someone can see. Now, again, we talked about wobbling, potentially. A lot of people say, oh, I feel nervous getting my right hand off, but I can do my left hand. The problem is in the balance. So again, this is something we can practice in the park. So find a park with a nice straight bit. Cycle along in a straight line, sitting nice and upright, and then just loosen the grip with one hand. You don't have to take it away from the handlebar, just loosen your grip so you're not really touching the handlebar. At that point, you're steering the bike by how you're sitting. And ride around a little bit with your hand in that position and feel how you learn to shift your weight into the saddle. And you're actually in connection with your bike through the saddle. And then put your hands back on. Try it with the other hand, loosen the other hand, sit in the saddle and feel what the bike feels like. Once you've got that feeling of control by how you're sitting, you can do whatever you want with your hand. You can signal, whatever. But again, give yourself the time to learn. And as Sarah was saying, go to the park and practice it and then apply it. And that applies quite a lot with female riders. When I've done female riders courses, take time, allow yourself to become confident, I'd say. Now we're getting on to roadcraft and so on. A few things that are worth thinking about is how far from a parked car would you be riding on the road? Now the answer I'd like to hear is 1 car door and a little bit more, because although it might seem counterintuitive, and as Sarah said, you're taught to maybe be self-effacing and get out the way, it is very dangerous to be too close to a car, because there are the car doors that can open, you're less visible, someone could come out from between parked vehicles, a pedestrian, and you're much more visible to the cars behind. And importantly, you're inviting the cars to squeeze past you. If you're passing a parked car, you keep a good distance, 1 car door and a little bit more. Similarly, distancing from the curb. You need to be a good meter out. You don't want to be riding in the gutter. You don't want to be riding over drain covers. And you certainly don't want to be inviting people to overtake you when you're looking at the road surface and avoiding those hazards in the road that might trap your wheel. So you stay at least a meter away from the curb. Thinking a little bit more about road positioning, as a cyclist, we are equal road users. We have just as much right to be on the road as any other road user. It may seem counterintuitive to new cyclists, oh, I shouldn't be in the way. You're not in the way, you're another road user. So as a cyclist, I look forward and I have to make a decision. Is the lane in front of me big enough for 1 vehicle, or is it big enough to allow me to let a car past? If the road is only big enough for 1 vehicle, that's me, the cyclist. I will take the middle of the lane, the primary position, and I will proceed through there until such times it's safe to allow the car to pass me, or there's a safe for them to do a normal overtaking move as they would pass another car. If there's plenty of room and I want to allow the car to pass me, I can go a little further in the lane, secondary position, and allow the car to pass. Now, there are times on the road when this is important. When you come out to a parked vehicle, you're going to look behind yourself, you're going to make eye contact with the driver behind, and you're going to pull out in good time so that you can go around that parked vehicle at a good door's length. The same applies with lane changing.
I think we're going to have to wrap it up there, Jeremy, just to leave some time for the Q&A.
Okay, can I just do 30 seconds more?
Of course.
HGVs are a sort of great anxiety for some people. There's a link that Chloe will be sending to you, which is to do with dealing with HGVs. The rule is don't go up on the inside of them. It's well put in the video. Route planning, it's good to Google Street View. If you have time beforehand, when it's not a rush hour commute, go and check your route beforehand so you can actually get it in your head. If you've got the route in your head, then you've got more attention on the task in hand of your roadcraft. Homework links coming from Chloe. Thank you, Reese.
Perfect, thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, just to leave a little bit of time for some of the questions that have come through. One of the first questions, which was partly answered in the chat regarding the example of a puncture, but the broader question was what training is available to enable you to manage owning a bike. Obviously, the example of a puncture was sort of fairly well answered in the chat, but yeah, I think that leads on quite nicely from yourself, Jeremy. So if you maybe want to take that one.
Right, the most important thing about bike maintenance is checking your bike. There's a link that Chloe's got to a Sustrans video, which is an M check, a methodical check, where you can go through your bicycle and check everything's as it should be. It takes a while to learn how to spot everything. Find a friend that can help you, refer to a mechanic if you can, but there's a link to the M check. Once you've identified things to do with a bike, there are free courses around, there are doctor bikes, and turn up and watch someone fixing a bike. Ask a friend to show you how to fix it, and so on.
A lot of these courses are available through Westminster Council, obviously within the North Bank area, and they're offered to anyone who lives, works or studies in the borough. So assuming most people are doing one of those things in the North Bank area, given this webinar, yeah, have a look on the council website. Would be a good place to start for that. Our next question, I lost it here. So options on bike storage and any related expense if you don't want your bike cluttering up your living room. I know that's something I've personally found. My bikes are slowly taking over my flat. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what our panelists' approaches are to bike storage. Yes, Steve. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yeah. Well, first of all, lobby your council to put in bike hoops. Number one. I think here in Waltham Forest we've got 500 or 600 at least, and hundreds more coming because they're so oversubscribed. Really, it's difficult. You know, if you have a front yard, you can invest in a shed, but it's not cheap. There are options inside to raise your bike, put it on the wall, various other things like that in brackets. Bike hoops do get broken into, but you know, no worse than locking your bike up out the front, I would say. So yeah, the biggest thing I think that can happen is bike hoops. You know, secure storage from council, because so many people can't, especially if you're in a flat, it's extremely difficult to get your bike in and out.
Yes, Jeremy.
There is the option of a folding bike, of course. They can be more expensive, but it is an option to have a bike with smaller wheels that will fold, that you can take in. They're often lighter, and you can hook the saddle over your shoulder if you've got to go up the stairs and so on. I've got a couple of folding bikes. The other 13 are in the garage.
To come in from another perspective as well, bike storage is so annoying, and there are a lot of companies that are thinking about how to fix this. I know there's a lot of central London sort of venues that are shut down that are now sort of turning into bike storage venues. A lot of concert venues have changed to be like that. Probably a controversial opinion, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Think about whether or not you need to own your own bike if you haven't got one already. Have a look at the bike hire stuff that is near your house, especially if there are electric bikes. They're in the process of, it'll take a long time, but electrifying the Santander bike system. If you have a hire bike system that's near your house and near where you are most likely going to be commuting to, and you don't have somewhere secure to store your bike, maybe a yearly subscription to that is a better solution for you in the sort of meantime.
That's a really good point. And also within the North Bank area itself and South Westminster bids in general, there are quite a few of the stands for Boris bikes, and obviously the hire bikes are out there as well. So that's a good option. Sorry, yes, Jeremy.
I've got a number of rubbish bikes. The beach bike, if I'm going off somewhere in the evening, I've got a 30 quid bike that I can take with me. If that gets nicked, I've got a 20 quid bike. They're all perfectly serviceable and lovely and rideable, but they look ghastly. So that is an option, and it's what I do when I'm going out. I don't have to worry about it. It's also worth having a couple of locks so that no one's going to pinch your front wheel. But yeah, rubbish bikes, race to the bottom.
Insurance as well is not as expensive as you would think, and gives you the peace of mind that if you've got a good quality lock and your bike, and you give those details to your insurance company, if something does happen to it, you know that it's going to be replaced.
Yeah, those are all really good points. And also the second-hand bike market. Obviously, at this moment in time, bikes are getting harder and harder to come by. So yeah, the second-hand market is one worth exploring if you don't already own a bike. Obviously, there are certain things you need to look for, and there are no shortage of guides on YouTube and Google in terms of what to look for if you are buying a second-hand bike, because you do want to make sure that it's serviceable and it's safe. But yeah, worth looking out for, and obviously, not kind of cost you quite as much if you are unfortunate enough for it to be nicked or attempted to be stolen. I'm conscious that we are 1 minute before the end of this webinar. There are a few other questions which I will circulate to the panelists, and maybe we can get an email out to everyone who's attended, along with the recording, for you to share with anyone you think this webinar might have been interest to. So the last thing, just to say thank you to all of you for attending, to all of our panelists for giving us their time, and hope everyone has a good rest of their day.